Hello, friends. DJ Lance Rock here in conversation with Mr. Malcom Mooney. Malcolm, had the pleasure last year in 2016 of performing with you at Moog Fest as part of the all ages thing, and it was kind of an improv, little free-form jam, but you were the glue that held it all together.
No, I thank you for that, but there was more glue. There was Mark Mothersbaugh, wasn't there? Wasn't he there?
There was a lot of pieces of construction paper, but you were the glue that held it all to make it into a pretty picture.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your career. Like, when you went to Germany, did you go over there to do music, or you were primarily interested in art, or what was your...
I was primarily interested in getting away. The first part of the trip was about seeing architecture. And it was, that's what I thought the first part of the trip was going to be about. I met Serge Cherepin on the first part of the trip.
Wow.
And Serge introduced me to Emmanuel Nunez, who was, he was a paraplegic composer, and he had written a piece for 800 million Chinese to sing at one time, so that the earth would change its position. At least that's what he wanted to happen. Now, I don't know why he wanted that to happen, but that was his idea. I met him in Paris. And the idea of music, I was carrying a saxophone with me that I had gotten in Boston. So it might have been music, but there was a lot to do with art, period. You know, yeah, Serge was influential. He asked us to do a musical piece at a little theater up near the Pantheon. And that little, like a little club, and I played saxophone that day. Not that I know that much about saxophone, but I used to love to honk and toot on the saxophone as much as I could. I thought it was the one most. I think because of John Coltrane and Ohm, and I love the idea of that sound. And it was a tenor also that I had. But that was possibly one of the reasons I was there. Because when we traveled, a friend of mine and I, Joshua Zim, we traveled to hitchhike actually through Europe to Spain, and then took off to go to the east. We wound up took a train from Salzburg, Austria, to Istanbul. And in Istanbul, I bought a Chennai. And
how big was it? Was it like a little bitty one?
No, it was a wooden one. It was a wooden one, and it had a wooden bell also. It didn't have a brass bell. Actually, I'm mistaken. I didn't buy the Chennai. I bought flutes in little metal flutes in Turkey, because I bought a Chennai in Mumbai, in Bombay. That's where I bought the Chennai. And we traveled overland from Istanbul to as far as Karachi, Pakistan.
Wow.
And then we took a boat from Karachi to Bombay. Well, at that time we called it Bombay, but Mumbai. You know. But I was looking at things such as like in a street in Afghanistan or Pakistan, where you could not see what was behind the walls. You know, the street would be like a walled street, but there would be beautiful areas. You know, the homes behind the walls where everything was actually taking place. It's amazing to see a different world, you know. And at that time, you know, there was not the idea of what's going on in 2015, 16, or 17. You know, you don't, that wasn't on anybody's mind, at least not on the minds of the people that were traveling.
Well, you couldn't put it on Instagram, so you actually had to digest it and process it and have it become a part of your being, your essence.
Yeah, it was. In fact, that's why this hat's rolled like this, I think, because in Pakistan they have these hats, these woolen hats that they roll this way, and I had one when I was there. You know, yeah. But you know, you see the architecture, and I think the call to worship was another thing, a musical thing.
Right. Yeah.
From the towers, you know, I think everybody, if they could have, they needed to. You know, I tell my nephews that well, they've seen South Africa and stuff, but to see the rest of the world, it gives you a different perspective of actually who you are.
100%.
You know,
couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. So when you were over there, when you met Serge Cherubin, was he developing? Had he already developed the Serge synthesizer yet, or?
No, I don't think that was the case. Because years later, Serge worked at the Multimedia Center. When I came back to the States, Serge was working at NYU. Subotnick, I think, had developed the Multimedia Center at NYU. And that's where I re-met Serge. And I think that's where the process started, actually.
Okay.
And that's, you know, that's back. But then when we start, but the idea that you were talking about before about that Moogfest thing was actually a wonderful period for me to see and hear what was going on with this electronics on the electronic side, you know, electronic, and then and to meet more people and to meet Bootsy. You know, I mean, I thought that's my big thrill to meet him, and that was and to meet Kate.
Yes,
Stone.
Dr.
Yeah,
Kate Stone.
Kate
Absolutely.
Stone.
That was a good group of people there.
Yeah.
You know, when you brought Peter Kahn
Peter Kahn,
from
yeah,
Negative
yeah,
Land,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that was a really
Yeah.
good thing and very inspirational. But I just want to just jump real quickly because so you were in Germany, you met Serge, you met the members of CAN, the rest is history, and then you came back to the States, and then is that when you decided to focus on your art or
Yeah, this is.
I just wanted to pick up the narrative there because we kind of all know
No, but yeah, okay.
the other stuff.
I had left school. I was at Boston University, and I left Boston University before I graduated. Because I left in '68.
Okay.
And I did not know at the time that you're supposed to file for graduation. I thought they said, "Oh, you're ready to graduate," but no, they don't do that. They didn't do that. You're supposed to apply. So when I returned in '69, and 70 actually, beginning of '70, I reapplied for. I went to School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. I wanted to be in advertising. So I took an advertising course.
You are a salesman.
I took an advertising course, and I was at Young and Rubicam at night. That was where the school was held, or advertising school was held. And some years, I guess two semesters in there, and then one of the accountant execs said to me, why don't you join Young and Rubicam? I thought he was joking.
Why?
You know, it was sort of like out of the blue he said it. I thought,
Okay,
you know.
sure.
I did a couple of ads I thought they were kind of interesting, such as for the Early Bird and the Night Owl, which was an ATM idea, thinking about people who get up early in the morning and have to go to work, and musicians who are late at night who need to get some money out of the machine. So that was early bird, the night owl. No, and so anyway, I went to school of Visual Arts, Manhattan, and then I took those courses back with the credits actually back to Boston University, because I'd called Boston University up and said, what courses do I need to graduate? Because a woman from the school who I was friendly with said to me, Malcolm, you have enough points to graduate. You didn't apply, but you had enough points to graduate. So I said to I didn't ask the registrar at the time, but I asked, and it was Barbara Mays, but I asked the school itself, the School of Visual Arts, what do I need? And because they really want you to spend some money there, they said, oh, you need such and such a course to graduate. So I said, if I take these courses, which I had already taken, I put it in as a question, if I take these courses, would they be accepted for graduation? And they said yes, and then I just shipped those courses, those completed courses to Boston, and I said, okay, you can graduate. So in '79, I graduated from Boston University with a Bachelor's of Fine Arts. And then 82, I came out to California, and I went to Cal State University, Los Angeles, and I got a fellowship at Cal State. There was one of my most important people for me was a guy by the name of Charles Davis. And Charles Davis was a 4-time Fulbright scholar. And I had met him in Boston years before, and he's the one that introduced me to not Arnett Coleman, but to Eric Dolphy's music.
Oh, wonderful. Out to lunch.
That's right.
I know that.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And he was very important in my life because he was also teaching at Cal State, and he was teaching African and African American studies, and he had played with Johnny Diani in Europe, and he was the one that tried to teach me saxophone when we were in Boston.
Oh.
And my big story about him teaching me saxophone in Boston was I had a studio in Boston at the Chickering Piano Factory, and Charles says, "Oh, so you want to play saxophone?" I said, "Yeah." So I had my saxophone, and he would come by. He would try to take me through the changes, etc. And then one day he said, "Let's go over to Morley's on the square." Morley's was a club on Mass Avenue in Boston. It's near Symphony Hall, actually. And we walked in, and there was like 4 or 5 guys standing at the bar and stuff. And Charles said, "Okay, let's go up and we hit some." So Charles got up there, and I got up there. We started playing. At least Charles was really playing. I think I was just, looking like I might be able to play. And Charles, he was playing hard. And then we got off the bandstand, and the guys out at the bar, they nodded, something like that. And then we went left and went back to my studio. And Charles said to me, "Malcolm, man, these paintings are great." And I said, "Oh, thank you, Charles." He said, "But that saxophone playing, I realized that he was saying that, maybe I could just put the horn down and use the pencil, use the paintbrush.
I'll paint your horn.
Paint my horn, yeah. That might have been the way. But he was wonderful. He was a wonderful, wonderful person. And he is the one that actually wrote my recommendation to get into Cal State with a fellowship. So I got a stipend, a monthly stipend.
That's awesome.
And that was that's where I got my master's degree, Master's of Fine Arts out of Cal State.
Excellent.
And so that's another person who should dedicate something, because he passed. I had written a letter to him. He lived over on Miracle Mile here in California, and his father actually was a heart surgeon, one very, very important heart surgeon. And so, but I wrote him a letter asking how he was doing, etc., and never received a letter back. And then one day his wife wrote to me and said he had passed. And I was, very sad. He was like a very, very influential person in my life. Good musician. And there are some, I think there's some albums with him and Johnny Deani playing out of Europe. I forget where Johnny Deani was located. But yeah. So
Well, great, great.
That's part of my.
Well, hopefully you will. You'll either, do an art piece to him or some poetry or some music.
I'm glad you brought. Yeah, I will. I will do that. Yeah. And that's about. Well, then because of Cannes, in leaving Cannes, I got involved with my mother's church again and started working with the choir. And the thing that happened with Cannes was I decided, can I do this without the other things that were in my life at the time? Mm-hmm. So I went to the church choir, which I had been in the junior choir years before. I went back to the church choir and joined the church choir, and started singing. And that means every Sunday you go out there and you do whatever you're going to do. And also I decided that I wanted to be the sound guy for the church. And also I wanted to be the guy who had these choir sessions from church, bring churches from all over the county into the church for a weekend of not competition, but a week of celebration. And that became
So some different congregations would come in.
Yes. And I became a very good friend of Julius Hemphill from the World Saxophone Quartet.
I met Julius Hemphill.
And Julius, my story with Julius is a friend of mine named Amos Rice introduced me to Julius Hemphill because I designed a poster called Jazz for Cartographers, which was actually at Amoeba. In fact, Mark bought one of them. I guess I don't know, but Mark bought it, and it was a purple and white poster of the musicians coming from St. Louis, what's it called? There's a group of musicians, David Murray, Oladara, Julius Hemphill, a number of musicians who were just coming into New York. And a friend of mine, Amos Rice, wanted to do this concert series, which took place at La Mama in Manhattan, and also at Jimmy Garrison's wife's house, loft. And so my introduction to Julius was at La Mama for a rehearsal. And I'd spread these paintings on the floor. And Julius saw this drawing. He said, "Oh man, I want that. Oh man, I want that painting. I want that." And I'm the kind of person who really doesn't want to give away a painting, even if you are a great musician. So I packed all my stuff up, and I had this old red Nissan or something, some kind of red car. It was actually my dad's car. I packed it all up and I put it in the trunk of the car. And I was about to drive away when Julius jumped up on the trunk of the car and started stomping, saying, "I want that drawing." I said, "Julius, no, I'm sorry, I can't." So I drove away, and Julius jumped off the back of the car. And weeks later, Amos said I wanted to go by and pick up Julius. We'd go for breakfast. So we were on, Morningside Drive, and we're going to go across 125th Street. We picked Julius up. We're driving across 125th Street, and Julius sitting in the front seat next to me, and I'm sitting over here. And Julius said, and he pulls a razor out of his pocket. He says, I should just cut you for doing that to me. And I said, Julius, as soon as that razor comes up out like that, I'm going to swerve the car over on that side of you and crash the car into the side of the road. And Julius said, "Oh, you're as crazy as I am." And he put his razor back in his pocket. And that's how our friendship began.
That's a love story.
I became Julius's health caregiver. I would drive him to different hospital appointments because he had dialysis. He had to need dialysis. So I'd drive him to the doctor's appointments. I'd take him to recording sessions, and I remember 2 recording sessions in Connecticut. And then he asked me to design a set of music stands to go to Hamburg. And the idea for the music stands were weight. So I designed these music stands out of corrugated plastic. They were the same color as that can color. It's hot pink. It was a hot pink music stand. 6 of them it was for the JAH. His band was a sextet.
Okay.
And I designed these 6 collapsible music stands, which I received back from his then partner. I received back those music stands, so I have them up in my storage place. But it was before he had passed, because he passed he passed April 1st, I think, April 1st, 1995. And it was a sad day for me, because I had gone to the hospital to see him, and I think it was the night of the Final Four. I'd gone to the hospital, he was in the hospital, I went to see him, and he asked me to go to his apartment and get some the fluids for dialysis. I mean, they had him in the hospital also, but he wanted me to go there and get them. So I went to I said to him, I said, it might be difficult for me to get in your apartment because the doorman, it might be a different doorman on that doesn't know me. And I went to his apartment, and I was at the front door, and it was a new doorman, and I said, I need to go to Mr. Hemfield's apartment. And he said, no, you don't have authorization to go there. And a woman in the lobby said to me, she had come in, one of the tenants come in, don't let him in now, don't let him in the building, don't let him in the building. And I said, but I need to get this medication for Julius. And she said, no. So I had to call the hospital and get Julius to call back. And finally I was able to get the medicine. I left, dropped it off at the hospital, and the next morning I get a call saying Julius had passed that night. And I felt guilty because I said, maybe if I had got the medication back earlier, or maybe if the doorman, but it wasn't my fault. It was that time. At that time. But he was and he played before, months before he had played at my mother's church. He played, I think I still have the recording. He played a solo piece at my mom's church. Yeah, he was an excellent musician.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it seems like the narrative here is that in your life, in your creative life, music and art are inextricably linked together. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's a good statement. Fair. Very good. Yeah.
And so how did you end up coming to work with White Columns?
Matthew Higgs. Joe and I think that was our first date, and it was the book an arts book, independent art book festival, and my wife Jo had a friend there, Beth Dougherty, and some other figures. She was very well connected with the book world, still is, and I was wandering around. It's the old Dia building in Manhattan. So I'm wandering around in there, and I saw this gallery that had these records out. And there was a man behind the counter, and I said, "Oh, you do records?" And he said, yes. I said, you ever know of a group called Can? And he said, yeah, I used to listen to them when I was a teenager, you know. And which I said, well, you know, my name is Malcom Mooney. Oh man, fantastic! We got to do something together. That's what Matthew said. Matthew became one of the. He's a wonderful director. I mean, wonderful person in the art business. He's on top of a lot of stuff. And that's how I met Matthew for the first time. And I think the first project I did at White Columns was called the Bulletin Board. And it was a drawing with China markers on plexiglass.
I'd love to see that. That sounds great.
Yeah, and it has it's a drawing with a poem on it. And that was the first show. And then I think the last show I did was called Shadow Light. It's spelled SHAD hyphen OH hyphen LIGHT, Shadow Light.
Shadow Light.
Yeah, and it was a great show for me because I had wanted to do a show about perception. Not only perception, but I wanted to do it so that I'd been designing these paper pieces that were linked, hooked, you know, they were interlocked without using glue or anything, anything that speaks. But they were, you know, so they would go like they could lock together with folding, not origami, but it was, I guess maybe from that idea in a way, and also from sculptural ideas I've ever had. And so I had Joe and I are living in Calgary at the time, and Matthew came to Calgary, and I had made a lot of maquettes, which he then had me be his. He was curating, so I was his curatorial project. So we went up to Banff, and I did a poetry piece, but I had a bag of like 2 bags of these maquettes, and I passed them out to the audience. And a curator from Toronto said to me, don't pass them out, get paid. That's what he said. He said to me.
Smart curator.
Yeah, right. Yeah, really. But I passed them out, and that whole idea of those maquettes went to the show at White Columns in a larger format. And I had a friend of mine, Ray Scarrett, videoed the installation. And also there was another young man by the name of Aubrey Mayer who documented the installation. But the installation, for the first time, besides the installers, I had a guy named Ashley Stevenson, who designed just similar to this idea here. He designed a grid for the system, a grid for the ceiling, and we put in 8 floodlights. No, sorry, 8 spots. We put in 8 spots, and he hired somebody to make the computer, use a computer to give intensities to each light in the ceiling, so that the motion would be the light source would sweep the whole wall, so like from sun up to sunset kind of idea. And the idea starts to be about white paper on a white wall, which generates shadows of different shades, such as from the lightest gray to the darkest gray, which could be black. That was the first idea, and because I wanted people to understand that white could generate something, with light can generate another, well, I won't call it another intensity. I won't call it a color. I don't call black and white colors, actually. So
let me cut for a second. So we're rolling it.
Sounds beats.
Okay. So not necessarily, yeah, not a color, but like another perception.
Perception, right,
Basically,
right.
so the light on the white would just have different, you know,
Different gradations of the gray,
gradations
yeah,
was
yeah,
the exact
yeah,
word I
yeah,
was
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
use.
So what happens is, I also went to the supermarket nearby, and I had them had them go to the supermarket. They bundle cardboard in these bands. They make a big stack of cardboard and they strap it at supermarkets. So I had them roll get one of those bundles and roll it over to the gallery and put it in the middle of the floor as a sculpture. John Chamberlain, who does crushed cars assemblage. I took that idea from him, and the idea became that this piece of crushed cardboard, which they put in these big machines and crushed all the cardboard together, which was my piece of sculpture. So that was placed in the middle of the floor. I had 3 sweeps in the light system, so that the lights would go across the wall, but it would go from left to right, and so that it would go 30%, 40%, 100%, and back to 30% and out. And there were 3 sweeps, and they were 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and 1 minute. And they would sweep the wall. And this is due to the 2 people, that Ashley and this other guy, I forget who computerized the whole thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
So then, after 2.5 weeks, I said, please take all that stuff down, paint the walls black. And then we put black paper up. And the black paper has the highlights almost to white. Actually, when the light hits it, you can almost get white. So I started saying, wow, maybe people will understand that just because the word says black or the word says white, or the way that people social commentary is white, the white people and the black people, maybe they'll understand that doesn't actually happen. That depending on the light, this whole thing is actually a visual perception. It's not actually what you think. It's not actually what you see, but it's what you think.
Absolutely.
So.
And all look the same in the dark.
Yeah. So this became the issue. Now I don't know how many people, because there's no written text about this in the gallery. It was just about seeing, and that's what was the most important part to me. So the show went very well for me, very, very well. I enjoyed it.
Well, this sounds like fascinating. Like everything that you've told me, these are stories I've never heard. These are things I hadn't read about you. So it seems like you've got a book in you or something like that.
Oh, yes.
You know?
In fact, Matthew Higgs is one of the people that wants the poetry book.
Beautiful.
And Joe actually is also working on the larger volume. So
That's great. And I know somebody that you've collaborated with recently, Jamaluddin Takuma.
Oh yeah.
He has an album called Renaissance Man, but
he's something
it
else.
seems like you are truly the Renaissance
Oh, thank
Man,
you.
and you have a lot of things. I mean, you're still going strong with visual arts, with poetry, with music, and there was a show that you just played here in
Oh, it
Los
was great.
Angeles
Yeah,
that was
great time.
incendiary. Is the only thing I can say. It was a great show, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us, and continued
Thank you, brother.
success. Keep climbing the ladder.
Thank you very much.
DJ Lance Rock here with Malcom Mooney. If you don't know, now you know.
Thanks, Lance.
Excellent. Very good.